Dawson. My name is Dawson Harmon. I'm 34 years old and an account executive at a local bank. I am married to my wonderful wife Mandy, and we have two adorable children, Bobby, 8, and Jenny, 6. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, and with two small children, our passion sometimes fades to the level of embers. Our sex life was active before children. We made love 5-6 days a week, sometimes even several times a day. Now we are lucky if we manage to set aside 2 times a week for intimacy. This happens because of what is called family life. Our responsibilities, yes, I say our responsibilities, because running a home is a full-time job that includes management, finances, childcare, cooking, driving, laundry, cleaning, and more, all in one person. I have great respect and admiration for what my wife does every day. Responsibilities and a grueling life with children make former activity impossible, and no, we are not the exception to the rule. Gradually, like white-hot magnesium, our sex life cooled until it now more closely resembles the flickering orange light of a dying fire. We mostly had sex 2 to 3 times a week, although unforeseen circumstances sometimes intervened. Colds, nightmares, and rare business trips for training could disrupt the usual routine. My job is demanding and stressful at times, but it's nothing compared to what she does. So when she says she's too tired or not in the mood, I don't insist on sex. I try to keep the romance alive. A gift of flowers and her favorite chocolates for no reason, a foot or full body massage with a glass of wine after the kids are asleep, followed by a hug without the expectation of sex when I see she's had a hard day. I give her time to herself by running the bath, taking the kids out for fast food or ice cream, or letting her go shopping with her friends or watch a movie. If I come across as an ideal husband, let's dispel this myth right away. I really try in our relationship, but I know that sometimes I could do more. I could help out more around the house, but I come home tired, and after taking the kids to classes, helping with homework and lawn care, working on the car, and fixing things around the house, I'm exhausted. Sometimes I get irritable and complain when I think Mandy should have done some work, although I try to avoid it. 6 months ago, Mandy made a new friend named Chrissy at the supermarket. So when Mandy asked permission to attend girls' Friday nights with a new friend, I couldn't object, since I myself usually played golf on Sundays during the warmer months, and it wasn't like she needed or sought my permission. So soon after we spoke, Mandy started going out with a group of Chrissy's friends on Friday nights. This was at the beginning of February. By the 1st of April, I noticed a significant change in Mandy's behavior. Before April, she always appreciated my efforts to keep the spark alive in our relationship and in our home life. Mandy's changes came gradually and coincided with her new friendship with Chrissy, intensifying as she began her hen nights with Chrissy and her gang. By March, it was Fridays and every other Saturday, and the changes over time became more pronounced. She became distant and irritable. Some weekends, she would spend the entire day shopping with Chrissy and then go out again in the evening. She became short of words and often blamed me for minor things that I didn't do or didn't do on purpose. She became vindictive, unreasonable, and even disrespectful for no apparent reason. Her irritation could start with nothing and continue for hours, sometimes days. Her nightly forays became longer and longer as time passed. At first it was from 7 to 10 p.m. In a week from 7 to 11 p.m. By early March, she regularly stayed outside until midnight, sometimes until 1 a.m. twice a week. Now, going into April, it's 2-3 a.m. She would come home hungover, sleep until lunchtime, and miss outings with the children. She shopped all day Saturday with Chrissy, but left me to do the shopping myself with the kids in my arms. I had to stop playing golf on Sunday afternoons because she either wouldn't or couldn't take care of the kids, and told me it was selfish of me to expect her to look after the kids after spending time with them all week. Our sex life stopped. The many excuses, obvious refusals, and gaps in her arguments that she was too tired because of childcare or because of some oversight on my part that left her angry or indifferent, began to wear me down. I continued to try my best to be supportive, understanding, and loving, but my efforts, according to Mandy, were a manifestation of narcissism, jealousy, and mistrust. However, the gap between us, the dissonance caused by her relationship with Chrissy, and the increasing frequency and duration of her nightly outings, as well as her decreasing participation in my and our children's lives, became unbearable. A wife and mother should not walk until early morning, and even several times a week. I began to suspect that she might be cheating, and as time passed it became more and more likely. The depth of the problems in our marriage came to light last weekend, and I later discovered that my suspicions were justified. I was hoping to try to make amends and talk to Mandy. Suddenly, I remembered a line from the theme song for the TV series Cheers. In this world, you have to do whatever it takes to survive. Sometimes you need a break to get rid of all your worries. Don't you wish you could run away? I thought a weekend together would help us talk and reconnect. I called a travel agent and made a reservation at a cozy little bed and breakfast with fireplaces and in-room jacuzzis located in a small town full of antique shops and restaurants. I called my parents and arranged for them to take the kids for the weekend. I thought we could go for walks, shopping, and dinner while talking and reconnecting. I couldn't wait to get home and surprise Mandy with the look on her face. I called Mandy and told her to treat herself to a salon and get her hair and nails done. She said she couldn't because she needed to pick up the kids, but I said I'd ask the parents to do it. I asked them to pick up the kids and then go to our house and pack for the weekend. I left work 2 hours early and bought a dozen roses, some handmade chocolate truffles, and a bottle of champagne. I arrived home, packed our suitcases, and packed all her cosmetic and personal items, and loaded the car. We would drive for an hour, stop for dinner, maybe dance before soaking in a relaxing jacuzzi bath with chocolate and champagne for dessert, and then a night of tender love. Like most fantasies, everything was perfect, and while reality often pales in comparison to dreams, I was completely unprepared for the weight reality would place on me that day. When I finished getting ready, I sat in the chair, relaxed, and waited for Mandy. I dozed off and didn't hear her enter the house. She was surprised to see me so early and panicked. "Dawson, what are you doing at home so early? What did something happen? Where are Jenny and Bobby?" "Calm down, Mandy. Mom and Dad picked up the kids, and they're fine. I came home early to surprise you. I thought we needed some time to reconnect, so I arranged a weekend for us at that little boarding house. We passed by on our way to your parents' place. Mom and Dad will look after the kids while we spend the weekend relaxing and restoring balance in our marriage and our lives. We'll enjoy the jacuzzi, sip champagne, and restore harmony in our relationship. Packed our things, and we're ready, so let's get going because it's going to take an hour, and I wanted to get dinner on the way, and maybe dance a little before I retire." I thought she would be surprised and pleased, but her face showed complete shock, and she looked miserable. "Dawson, you know that today is my bachelorette party, and tomorrow we are going shopping. We planned dinner and going out for tomorrow. How am I supposed to cancel at the last minute?" Now it was my turn to be shocked. "Mandy, for the last 6 months you've been going out every Friday night, then you've added whole days and most Saturday nights with your girlfriends, leaving me and the kids home alone. Then on Sundays you're lying in bed hungover or too tired after you come home at 2 or 3 in the morning. So it's simple. You call Chrissy and tell her that your husband asked you to spend the weekend with him. Look, Mandy, we never, and I mean never, spend time together as a family again, and we certainly haven't been alone in months. Our sex life is non-existent, and even when you're here in body, you're angry, irritable, and lying in. But the reality is that you are spiritually far away, and your mind is a million miles away from your husband and your children. We need this time to rediscover each other and talk about our problems. We used to talk a lot, but now you hardly find time for me or the kids. You spend time with Chrissy or go out with Chrissy and the girls. I thought you'd enjoy a romantic weekend together. Dawson, I was going to leave you a note because I thought you were at work, but Chrissy and the girls had a spa weekend planned, and she'd be picking me up in half an hour. I'm sure I told you so. When you suggested I go to the salon, I decided it was to get ready for our weekend. Mandy, this was a weekend for the two of us, not something you and she came up with at the last minute, and FYI, this is the first I've heard of it. So you were planning on running away for the entire weekend and leaving just a note? Why didn't you tell me about this when I talked to you this morning? Because you knew I wouldn't be happy, and you didn't mention it because there was no spa weekend planned as you just stated. Even if I hadn't planned a romantic weekend, you knew that last weekend was supposed to be at home. We discussed this after you arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning last Sunday, remember? Oh my God, Dawson, I forgot, but now I can't leave Chrissy. Damn Chrissy, you just lied to my face. You just said you had a girls' night out and shopping tomorrow. Now it's changed to a spa weekend, which I'm sure never existed. During one single conversation that lasted only 3 minutes. What the hell, Mandy? Are you lying to me on purpose now? Or is everything you've been doing for the past months a lie? I felt the blood rush to my face and anger surge through me, ready to explode like Vesuvius. As her husband, I should have mattered more than a friend or group of friends, but I soon realized that me and our children were low on her list of priorities. Amanda Elizabeth Harmon, your family should be the most important thing to you. You need to call Chrissy and cancel your planned trip and spend quality time with me, your husband. Dawson, can't we go next weekend? I promise to make it up to you. No, Mandy, this is the last straw. Either me and our children are the most important people in your life or not. I'm tired of you disappearing every weekend. We need this. I'm tired of you disappearing every weekend. And I spend it alone, except for the children. You owe me this. Okay, screw my life. I'll call and cancel so you can have your precious weekend. Then she turned and walked up the stairs, and I heard the bedroom door slam shut. What came over her? If this is how the whole weekend goes, then to hell with him, and her too. I went to her bag, took out her keys, and pulled out her house and car keys, as well as her debit and credit cards. I threw my bag out the door, went to the car, and took the spare key from its secret place. I returned to the house, closed the door, climbed the stairs, and entered the bedroom. She was on the phone with Chrissy. I shouted, "Let this bitch take you and leave you." Her eyes widened as she had never heard such a tone from me before. She jumped up and ran downstairs. I went to her dresser and started throwing her things into her suitcases. I went downstairs and got out some plastic garbage bags, then started emptying her closet. I opened the second floor window and threw her things out onto the front lawn. I quickly went downstairs, walked out the door to my car, and threw her bags on the pile. I went back to the car, took the chocolate, and dumped it on her things. I went back to the car and got the roses and champagne, then went into the house and threw the roses in her face. To top it off, I threw a bottle of champagne into the fireplace, where it crashed into pieces and spilled wine everywhere. Her jaw dropped, she stood there stunned, and I saw a hint of fear in her expression, as well as complete shock. I told her, "You haven't taken care of me these months, so the only conclusion that makes sense is that you had another man. Okay, go have sex with the one you've been sleeping with all these months. I don't care that I don't care anymore. You don't have a husband and a family anymore. It's not to hell with your life, it's to hell with the lives of your children and ours. Congratulations, now you can. Be that narcissistic bitch that you took on so well, and now you are free to put us out of our misery. Go live your life as a party girl and a woman of easy virtue until the cows come home. The sight of you makes me sick." I heard Chrissy's car pull up in the driveway. I walked past Mandy, who still hadn't moved, and told Christy to open the trunk. I grabbed Mandy's suitcases and stuffed them into Chrissy's trunk. I went back into the house, opened the door, and told Mandy to get out. As she walked to Chrissy's car, I told her not to come back. I closed the door while she screamed and sobbed. I locked all the doors. Mandy pounded on the door for several minutes before I heard a car door slam and Chrissy's car screeched around and drove away down our street. As the fog that had settled over my brain cleared a bit, I realized that I had non-refundable weekend reservations in a good location, and the kids were out and safe for that weekend. To hell with him. I needed to get away and think about my life for the future, so I jumped in the car and drove to the boarding house. Mandy. As Chrissy drove to her house, I cried nonstop. How could Dawson do this to me? I was hurt and I was angry. Chrissy said, "Hey, forget that pathetic husband. I know Jake will make you forget everything. He'll be back and at your feet by Sunday." My thoughts returned to the moment when trouble, with a capital B, literally entered my life. I met Jake at the end of March when we were at a club. I noticed him on the dance floor. His movements were smooth, he seemed to be floating. He was tall and handsome. Brown hair and soft blue eyes. I thought for a moment, imagining what it would be like to be in those strong arms, looking into those big blue eyes, dancing the night away. These are not the kinds of thoughts a married woman should feel about another man, but hey, it's just an innocent fantasy. I'm not going to act on it or cheat on Dawson. It's just harmless flirting in your mind, right? Wrong. I came out of my reverie and was back in conversation with Janice, one of our group, when I heard a voice next to me. "Do you want to dance?" I turned around and saw that it was the same guy I had been watching all evening. He said, "My name is Jake. Do me the honor and pleasure of dancing with me." I had admired this man from a distance, and now he was right here, and going on the dance floor with him was not a good idea. Since I'm married and a faithful wife, I said, "Thanks, Jake, but I don't think that's a good idea. I'm married." He seemed disappointed. He asked my name, and I said my name was Mandy. Chrissy chimed in and said, "Come on, Mandy, have fun. It's just a dance, and you've been dancing with men every time we've gone out, so what's the difference?" I thought, I know what the difference is. The difference is that I created a utopian fantasy of a man who could do no wrong and everything he does is just great. I was attracted to him, excited by him, and I wanted him in my thoughts. That's the difference. The more I thought about it, the more I decided that I deserved a little fun and fantasy, and after all, it's just a dance. What harm can it do? I can control myself, right? Absolutely. I was sure of it. I am confident that I can control myself as long as I enjoy it a little and that I will not cross the line between fantasy and reality. So I relented and said, "Of course." Jake took my hand and helped me up. He then put his hand on the small of my back and led me to the dance floor. Of course, the first song was slow, and it didn't take long for Jake to warm up to me. When the song ended, I excused myself and ran to the ladies' room and returned to our table. Jake decided to join us, but I knew I had to leave before he smelled me again and asked me to dance. We always order a taxi because no one wants to get a fine for drunk driving. So I called a car. Jake asked me to dance again, but I told him that I didn't feel well and that I should sit down and wait for the car to go home. When I got into the car, I realized that I had avoided being shot. In my current state, I wasn't sure I could resist his charms, and if he tried to seduce me, I would most likely succumb. I got home a little after midnight, and I really wanted to make love to Dawson to death, but he was fast asleep. I thought about waking him up. Suddenly, I had a moment of clarity, however brief, and I decided it wouldn't be fair to wake him up or get him up in the middle of the night to use him in such a cheap, disrespectful manner. I realized that I was deeply attracted to Jake and was playing with a fire that could easily get out of control and consume me in forbidden passion. And if I am not careful and in full control of myself, I will get badly burned. Will I be able to control this? No, tonight proved that I definitely can't. I was Icarus. With the wings I was given, I knew I would fly too close to the sun. I promised myself I would never dance with Jake again. The guilt of having such thoughts running through my head was overwhelming. I convinced myself that I would be faithful to my solemn promise, and this fragile calm allowed me to plunge into the arms of Morpheus. The next morning, I woke up alone in our bed, lost in thought. Dawson was and remains attractive, sexy, and a great lover who always satisfies me, not to mention he is a wonderful father and a loving, supportive husband. I've been feeling trapped in my life lately, and the stress of raising two small children has made me long for the carefree days when Dawson and I were first dating. Then there was no work, children, and responsibilities that could disrupt our idyll. I longed for the passion that was in our relationship when it was new, fresh, and full of unknown sensations. Dancing with Jake brought back those memories and filled me with the anticipation of something new and exciting, and the danger of the forbidden only increased the attraction I felt when Jake hit the dance floor. How welcome I felt when he came up, took my hand, and led me to the dance floor. I felt free, carefree, and full of life again. I was filled with passion and engulfed in a forbidden attraction to another man. Chrissy was always the life of the party, always looking for fun. I met her at the worst time in my life, when I felt lost and vulnerable. Chrissy kept telling me that I deserved some time off, that I deserved it, and Dawson should let me have some time to myself. She claimed that Dawson was smothering me and didn't want me to be happy. He was, in her opinion, a selfish and narcissistic fool. At first I defended him and told him how he gives me time to myself away from the children. However, her constant reproaches began to have an effect, and I soon began to feel a dislike for Dawson, which developed into anger. I began to find fault with almost everything Dawson said or did. If I didn't feel hostility or anger, I felt a strong sense of guilt for my behavior, which pushed me further away from Dawson and the children. This fueled my dark desires to regain the lost years and drive I lost with Dawson. I focused on my needs and my needs alone, which ultimately led to the situation I found myself in tonight. Unfortunately, the next Friday night, we found ourselves back at the same club where I met and danced with Jake, and shortly after we settled in, I smelled his scent. I turned towards the dance floor and saw him confidently heading towards our table. His blue eyes were full of determination and looked straight at me. I felt my heart skip a beat as he approached the table. Finally, he came and said, "Hi, Mandy." He took me by the hand and lifted me up, simply saying, "Let's go dance." The next thing I remember is him literally leading me onto the dance floor. I should have been angry, but instead I was surprised by his persistence. The first victim of the evening is my determination. We spent the next hour on the dance floor. When Jake suggested we go outside for some fresh air, all I could say was, "Lead." I was a prisoner behind the front line. As soon as we were outside, Jake took me in his strong arms and looked into my eyes. I saw all the passion and attraction that he felt for me. It seemed as if his gaze penetrated into the very depths of my soul. He leaned over and kissed me. He took me by the hand and led me to his car, which was parked in a dark and secluded corner of the parking lot. I thought about how scared I would be alone in this dimly lit place, but with Jake I had no fear. All I felt was incredible attraction and a little anxiety. I knew why we were heading to his car and why he chose this particular parking lot. It was far from prying eyes here. The second victim of the evening is unconditional surrender. He opened the door, and we climbed into the back seat of his car. I mentioned anxiety, and it was related to the thought of my husband sitting alone at home with our children, who by this point were fast asleep, surrounded by their dreams. Dawson was loyal, predictable, and in my mind at the time, boring. And I was in the company of a man I barely knew. But I knew what he wanted, I knew what I wanted, and I knew that it would definitely happen once we reached our goal. As soon as Jake kissed me, the anxiety disappeared. We had sex. I breathed in the cool night air and headed back inside. I went into the ladies' room, and as soon as the stalls were free, I immediately went into one of them. I washed it off and left the stall. I stopped to wash my hands and face. Then I put on my makeup again, brushed my hair, and joined Chrissy and the others at the table. I approached them when the last order was announced. I ordered a rum and coke and drank it in one gulp. Chrissy wanted to hear all the dirty details, and I told her some, but not all. With this action, guilt began to creep into my soul. I broke sacred vows and cheated on my husband Dawson. I wanted to swear to everything I held dear that this was a one-time mistake. I desperately wanted to do it, but I knew I couldn't. The third victim of the evening is loyalty. This is how my romance with Jake began. It soon went from the back seat to the bed in his apartment. It went from a one-time error in judgment to twice, or even thrice weekly recurring encounters. However, we never achieved the same intensity and pleasure that we experienced the first time. It took a long time before I realized that the fourth victim of the evening was my self-esteem, and the fifth perhaps, my marriage and family. It seemed that my consciousness had changed. I was overcome with guilt, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't look Dawson in the eyes, let alone make love to him. In the end, I couldn't even bring myself to have sex with him to satisfy his basic needs. My frustration at not being able to end my relationship with Jake and my overwhelming guilt made home life unbearable. I started spending more and more time away from home, sometimes with Chrissy and the girls, sometimes with Jake. I spent less and less precious time at home, and even when I was at home, because of the oppressive feeling of guilt caused by my affair, I was irritable and angry. And even when I was at home, because of the overwhelming guilt caused by my affair, I became irritable, angry, and short-tempered with those I loved. I was giving what rightfully belonged to my husband to another man, a virtual stranger. The irony was that the more I did this, the more the guilt grew, and the less I could give my husband what rightfully belonged to him, my love, fidelity, and devotion. And yet I couldn't or wouldn't stop. The last 6 weeks had brought me to the brink of disaster, where I found myself tonight, and I wondered if I had already crossed that line, free falling into the abyss of my own self-created hell. I was thrown out of the house because I didn't want to sacrifice a weekend with my lover for my husband. My carefree life turned out to be more important than my marriage and family. I couldn't believe I actually got so angry that I said, "To hell with my life. I'll call and cancel so you can have your precious weekend." How selfish and arrogant I was. For the first time in a long time, I realized what a huge mistake I had made in getting into relationships with Chrissy and Jake. I forgot and betrayed my husband and children for the sake of instant gratification. When I came to this sad and disgusting realization, the spell Jake had on me was finally broken. I was acting like a teenager, and I just hoped it wasn't too late. Dawson suspected, but I was sure he had no concrete evidence of my connection to Jake. This gave me a little hope that I could save my marriage if I took action immediately. So I suddenly yelled to Chrissy, "Take me to the airport car rental place right now." Chrissy was shocked and said, "What? We're supposed to meet Ron and Jake at the hotel for a weekend of fun. Big comfortable beds, champagne, sex, and room service for the whole weekend. Even a massage in the room, everything was paid for by the guys. Chrissy, my marriage is in jeopardy and I could lose my kids. I made a huge mistake and I have to correct it. Go to bed with Jake. Never, not now, not ever. How could I be so stupid, Chrissy? If you really are my friend, take me to the rental place or drop me off here and call me a taxi." "Okay, Mandy, I'm sorry, and I hope you can work things out with Dawson. It was just supposed to be innocent fun. I never thought it would go this far and endanger your marriage and family." So she drove me to the airport, where I took the bag Dawson had packed for me from the trunk of Chrissy's car, threw out the chocolate, thank God it was cool and it didn't melt, and rented a car with built-in GPS navigation. After receiving the keys, I threw my bag into the trunk of the rental car, got behind the wheel, started the car, and entered the address of the boarding house into the GPS before driving out. Then I decided to try to save the rest of my life. During the hour-long drive, I was forced to stop several times due to tears that blurred my eyes so much that I could not see the road. I knew with complete certainty that whatever had driven me into this destructive and detrimental addiction to my relationship with Jake had died during this trip, during which I hoped that the future would include Dawson, Bobby, Jenny, and I as a family. But when I confess what he already knew about his deepest and darkest suspicions, how can he find it in his heart to forgive me, and why would he need it in the first place? Dawson. The journey to the hotel was tiring and somewhat dangerous, as I could not stop the flow of tears. Several times I had to pull over to the side of the road to avoid an accident. Realizing that I could harm innocent people, I finally pulled myself together and returned to the road. It took me an extra 45 minutes, but I finally arrived in town. I realized I had lost my appetite, so I decided to skip dinner and head straight to the hotel. Driving down the main street, I noticed a liquor store. I pulled into the parking lot, got out of the car, and headed inside. I found whiskey and took 2 bottles of Mr. John Daniel's Old No. 7. I also grabbed 12 cans of Ewingling Amber Lager and headed to the cash register. When asked, I showed the seller my ID. I added a couple bags of chips and other junk food. The seller counted my order and packed it while I inserted the card into the terminal. After signing the screen, I took my bags and headed to the hotel. I arrived, checked in, took my bags from the car, locked the doors, and headed to my room. When I walked inside, I saw a large jacuzzi. I decided to fill it with hot water and turn on the hydromassage jets. While the water was filling, I lit the gas fireplace and began to cry again, because the romantic atmosphere had a strong effect on me. I thought, whatever. I went and got 2 trash cans and filled them with ice from the machine. I went back to my room and used them as makeshift coolers, one for beer, the other for bottles of whiskey. When the bath was full, I turned off the water. He took the glass from the shelf and placed it on the edge of the bathtub. I stripped naked, turned on Pandora, and as the music filled the room, I climbed into the tub with a bag of peanuts and turned on the jets. I felt how strong jets of water began to work their magic. I ate the peanuts, opened the beer, and added ice to the glass. After taking a long sip from the bottle, I quoted Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade from the Al Pacino movie. "Mr. John Daniels is preferred." So I opened the bottle and poured the whiskey over ice in a glass. He closed his eyes, took a sip of this cold nectar, then took another sip of the bottle of beer. I continued to repeat this process until the hot water and pulsing jets synchronized with the music. It didn't take long before my 2 liquid companions, along with the relaxing sounds and warmth, brought me into a state of numbness. Oddly enough, Neil Diamond's track, Cracklin' Rose, started playing. I thought how appropriate this was, since I too was only relying on the ladies from the store to keep me company that night. I felt warm and relaxed, but the pain, betrayal, and anger towards Mandy did not go away. I couldn't calm the storm in my soul with music. I couldn't drown the anger and pain of betrayal in beer or whiskey, and I couldn't soak the heartache in a jacuzzi. A little time passed, and I realized that I had drunk 6 bottles of beer and half a bottle of whiskey. Silly, I drank it all while in a hot bath and soon became dizzy and passed out as I tried to get out of the bath. I slipped under the water and actually began to drown. As my life was fading, someone tugged at me and pulled me out of the water. I vaguely remember a woman's screams, and then someone else helped pull me out of the bath and performed CPR. At that moment, it seemed that I was floating outside my body, watching what was happening, but it was like a dream. I know it's strange and incredible, but for me reality was suspended. It happened to me, but at the same time it seemed like it didn't happen. I thought I saw Mandy in the room, sobbing as the paramedics tried to clear my lungs and get my heart beating again. My heart was brought into a normal rhythm using a portable defibrillator before I was placed on a stretcher, loaded into an ambulance, and taken to a nearby hospital where I was taken to the emergency department. I woke up sleepy with a sore throat and stomach and a terrible headache. The lights were flashing in the room and the beeping of machines was heard. IVs were inserted into the right arm. I looked around the room and noticed a woman sleeping on one of the plastic hospital chairs that recline. It was Mandy. I thought, what is she doing here? I remembered the circumstances that led to my hospital stay before I later found out I was submerged underwater in the bathtub. I thought, I don't want her here. It didn't matter when I woke up and was more or less conscious, as I was put on a 72-hour mandatory observation for a psychiatric evaluation because they thought I was trying to intentionally drown myself. I told the doctor the whole horrific story of the events that led to me getting so drunk and was finally able to convince the psychiatrist that it was just a stupid accident and that I would never leave my children without a parent. The doctor explained that there were several factors that most likely led to me passing out. He said I was probably exhausted after a long week and day of work. I came home extremely stressed, which increased my adrenaline levels, then the long drive here, the drinks, and the heat in the jacuzzi. When I got into the bath and started drinking, I began to relax and was naturally tired after a week of work. I also lost energy due to the adrenaline rushing through the system. With the blood alcohol level increasing and combined with the heat of the bath, I most likely suffered heat stroke, and these factors caused me to pass out. When I slipped under the water, it was purely by accident. The doctor consulted with the sheriff, and I was discharged within 24 hours. Mandy returned to the B&B and stayed there for the night. She checked out of the hotel a day early, returned the rental car, and drove to the hospital where she waited for me to be released. Luckily, she was not allowed into the psychiatric ward where I was admitted after I regained consciousness. However, she was my ride back home. Even though I had calmed down and understood that we needed to talk, I was not prepared for the unpleasant truth that awaited me, although the trip back provided time to start a conversation. It was already late afternoon when the discharge was processed, and I was taken to the lobby. Mandy was already waiting with a car at the entrance. The orderly helped me into the passenger seat and fastened my seat belt. The first thing I asked Mandy was, "Have you eaten yet? I'm terribly hungry." She said no and took us to a small, cozy restaurant. We placed the order, and when the waitress brought the food, I dug into my burger and fries as if I hadn't eaten in months. I gulped down a chocolate milkshake and barely finished a piece of homemade cherry pie with a cup of coffee. Mandy ate a small salad and drank a glass of iced tea. When I had satisfied my hunger, I paid the bill. The cost of the meal was $1.25, and I gave the waitress a $100 bill, so her tip was $75. She looked like she needed them. Finally, it was time to face the truth, and as Mandy drove the car towards the house, she started a conversation. "Oh, Dawson, you scared me so much. When I saw you underwater, I was able to pull you out, and then I screamed, and one of the guests immediately came running. The man held you on the surface while I screamed for help and called 911. Master and two more guests pulled you out of the bath and began performing artificial respiration until the ambulance arrived." I thought to myself, this is how it happened, and I remembered what I saw during my out-of-body experience, but I didn't mention it at the hospital, otherwise I might still be there. She continued, "When they said it could have been intentional, I lost my cool. I couldn't bear the thought that what I did could cause you so much pain that you would decide to harm yourself. I knew deep down that you would never didn't leave our children, no matter what. I'm so sorry, Dawson, for my behavior that led us to this. I take full blame and responsibility. Please forgive me." I let her words sink in before responding. As I pondered her words, I noticed a motel on the road ahead. I asked Mandy to stop. I got out of the car, went inside, and rented us a room for the night with 2 beds. Back in the car, I told Mandy that we needed to get off the road to avoid causing an accident if she got emotional. We grabbed our things, went into the room, and settled in for the evening. I went to the bathroom, and so did she. While Mandy was in the bathroom, I grabbed some ice and a few cans of Coca-Cola. I took the time to call the B&B and ask if the people who helped me were still there. The owner said they would be there until the end of the weekend. I asked him to make their stay free and bill it to my credit card that he had on file. I also asked him to charge me an additional 2 nights for his efforts and for the inconvenience caused to other guests who were disturbed. He thanked me, wished me well, and said that after a little argument, he would reluctantly accept my money, since my near-fatal incident was an event for everyone and did not cause any serious problems. I sat down in a chair by the table, and Mandy lay down on the bed. I realized I needed to ask some tough questions, and now it was my turn. I started by thanking her for saving my life. "Mandy, I need to ask you some questions, and I want the complete truth. If I find out that you lied to me one time, it's over between us. Do you understand?" She nodded. "Okay," I said. "Thank you again for saving my life, but why are you here, and how did you get to the hotel last night?" "Dawson, I was shocked by your anger and that you directed it at me. When Chrissy dropped me off, I thought about everything you said, and it hit me like a truck had fallen. I felt shame and selfishness, and the only thing I wanted was to get to you right away. So I asked Chrissy to take me to the car rental office at the airport, since I knew it would be open late. I borrowed her credit card, rented a car, and hit the road, and found you underwater. You scared me so much. I came to apologize and spend the weekend with you. When I remembered what I said to you right before your outburst, I couldn't believe it came out of my mouth. Please forgive me, you, Bobby and Jenny are all in my life. I was so stunned by your reaction that I couldn't move, and when I finally came to my senses, you didn't answer the door. I knocked and knocked until Chrissy came and took me away. I wanted to tell you that you were. I'm right, and that I was supposed to go with you for the weekend. I can't believe how much I ruined everything. She started crying, and I knew I had done the right thing by stopping. I stood up, went to the tissue dispenser built into the sink, and grabbed a box of tissues. When I returned, I handed it to Mandy. I took 2 glasses of ice and opened a bottle of Coca-Cola. He poured the drink into both glasses and handed one to her. Taking a sip from my glass, I continued, Mandy, I'm sure all these late nights, cold and bitter attitude towards us, your anger and lack of physical and emotional intimacy are caused by another man in your life. Have you slept with another man? She couldn't look me in the eye, but she nodded yes, and her tears began to flow again. I asked, Are you in love with him? She shook her head furiously, denying it. Then why, Mandy? Is he prettier? Is he better in bed? She screamed. Nuo, please, Dawson, forgive me. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Oh God, what have I done? She began to choke, and I remembered that I had put a paper bag from the liquor store in my suitcase. I took it out and gave it to her. I instructed her to breathe slowly into the bag until her breathing stabilized. Mandy, I need to know why. Why did you break our vows, desecrate our marriage, disrespect me, our children, and most importantly, yourself? I just don't understand it. Dawson, I was feeling depressed and a little bored. When I met Chrissy, I was vulnerable and in a bad place emotionally. I was jealous of her single, carefree lifestyle, and she seemed to embody what I thought was missing in my life. I felt imprisoned in our marriage and motherhood, and I wanted to be free and carefree. I thought a night out with my friends would allow me to relax a little. Chrissy always attracted a bunch of guys who bought us drinks and asked us to dance. At first, I sat alone while the others danced. After a while, I thought nothing bad would happen if I danced and began to agree to invitations. I looked at her and tried to understand how she had become so lost, how she had turned from the woman I loved and cherished into someone I now barely recognized. The pain penetrated to the very depths of my soul. A frantic feeling of betrayal and deception awakened unbearable mental anguish. Every word of her confession was like a dagger stabbing into my heart. Mandy continued, As time went on, men started buying us drinks more often, and the more we drank, the more we danced, and the nights got longer. One day I noticed a handsome man. He was tall, dark, like you, but younger. I was intrigued, and fantasized about him asking me to dance, but didn't expect it to actually happen. And suddenly, he appeared at our table and asked me to dance. I tried to refuse, but in the end I agreed. We just danced, and he was a real gentleman. That night, I returned home in such a state that I wanted to literally pounce on you. However, I thought it wouldn't be fair to wake you up. Yes, I thought about him, but it was just a fantasy. Dawson, I felt so guilty that I just couldn't look you in the eyes. I distanced you and our children, became cold and irritable in order to preserve this fantasy world and be able to enjoy it. The next time, the same man appeared again and danced with me all evening. I was lost in my dreams, and desire clouded my mind. He suggested going out into the fresh air to cool off, and I agreed. He looked into my eyes and kissed me, and I kissed him back. I was overwhelmed by desire, and soon I found myself in the back seat of his car, where we had sex. He was no better looking or better in bed. He represented a life devoid of worries and responsibilities, a fantasy I desperately wanted to preserve. From then on, we continued to date, dance, and have sex. I was trapped not because of a man, but because of a fantasy. I was at his apartment several times, and yes, I planned to spend a weekend with him and Chrissy. Where we would spend time in the company of other men. We were supposed to be pampered with dinners, massages, champagne with strawberries, and unrestrained sex. But the moment reality finally broke through, it destroyed both my fantasy and my reality in one fell swoop. This is the whole truth, unvarnished. I didn't miss anything. No more lies. Dawson, your pain brought me back to reality, and suddenly the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I want you to know that I love you and our children more than anything in this world. I don't want to lose you or our family. I ruined everything terribly, and I would do anything to regain your trust and save our family. Please find there is room in your heart for forgiveness. She tried to show me sad eyes full of tears that were sincere, but I wasn't sure who these tears and regrets were for. Even though I didn't catch her in the act, her confession seemed a little artificial and contrived to me. She waited until the 11th hour, when it almost cost me my life, to reveal herself. My stupid decision led to this near disaster, and the blame for it lay with me, although it was her actions that became the catalyst that caused the chain reaction. It took me a few minutes to compose myself before answering. Collecting my thoughts, I said, "Mandy, you said that this other world you created was just a fantasy, and that you felt trapped in marriage and motherhood and wanted to live a life without responsibility, seeking fantasy, which she tried so desperately to preserve. Life has always challenged those who live. Survival and existence itself is not an easy task. Adults, since Eve destroyed paradise for us all, have had to live and cope with pressure. Despite her grave mistake, God allowed us to continue to create offspring and spread our species. He even asked Noah to build an ark to preserve humanity when the rest of the world behaved so badly that he had to destroy the entire population, except those few who ended up on the Ark of the Covenant. Since then, men and women have united and created families to continue the existence of the species and faced life's difficulties together, two as one. That's what marriage is. Remember when I asked you to be my wife? I asked you to think and be confident that you wanted to take this step, that you were ready for a lifelong commitment, and gave you time to think it over, without any pressure or coercion. But you came to me and said yes. Mandy replied, "Dawson, I loved you then, and I love you now, and I meant what I said. I want to spend my whole life with you." Mandy looked at me, and in her eyes there was a plea for forgiveness, for a ray of hope. I replied, "When we said our wedding vows in a church full of family and friends, before God, with our priest, best man, and your maid of honor as witnesses, do you remember what he said? Here are a few important things. First, he said that marriage is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly. Then he asked you if you were taking these vows of your own free will, and you answered him in front of everyone present, yes. He also said, renouncing all others, for richer and for poorer, in sickness and in health, for all your days, until death do you part. And we, you and I, have said, for 10 years I will honor this sacred vow, and my commitment to you, our children, and our marriage. And it has been my honor and privilege to do so for 9.5 of those years." Mandy began to sob inconsolably. I stopped to give her time to calm down and stop hyperventilating, and also to give myself a chance to take a break, calm down, and collect my thoughts. Part of me desperately wanted to ease her pain, and another part of me wanted her to feel just a little of the pain and humiliation that I felt listening to her confess about the past 6 months. Unfortunately, my worst impulses took over on this gloomy evening. She finally got out of bed, ran to the bathroom, and slammed the door. A few minutes later, I heard the shower water turn on and steam began to seep out from under the door. I poured myself more ice and topped up the glass with Coca-Cola. 45 minutes passed before Mandy emerged from the bathroom again. Her beautiful curls and brown hair, as well as her upper body, were wrapped in towels. Her eyes remained red and swollen, but she managed to stop the tears for a while. I asked, "Mandy, I haven't said everything I wanted yet. Do you want to continue now, or is it better to postpone until the morning?" She looked at me with apprehension, but answered softly, "Continue." I looked into her emerald eyes as I finally managed to suppress my dark thoughts and, with good intentions, tried to express sympathy and a little comfort. "Mandy, I tried to explain to you that we gave up our carefree life together and agreed to get married and start a family. We chose the responsibilities of adulthood and agreed to become responsible adults. Bobby and Jenna are asked to be brought into this world. you and I, consciously decided to give birth to these wonderful children. And in that moment, we promised to love them, care for them, and teach them until they were ready to go out into the world on their own. We both let our kids down this weekend. When I think about how I almost left them without a father, I feel ashamed of my stupid decisions and reactions that almost led to disaster. Your guilt, despite its presence, does not justify my bad reaction. For this, I apologize to you and our children. Mandy looked puzzled, not believing that I had apologized to her. I continued, however, you and I have serious and important decisions to make. Our faith does not condone divorce. However, no one should remain in a marriage that lacks love, fidelity, and mutual respect. Neither can I wait until you grow up and become a responsible person who thinks about the consequences of your decisions for yourself and others. You have turned a fairy tale fantasy into your personal reality. The direct consequence of this is the exclusion of everything else for the sake of your life of parties and lovers, the pain you caused me with your betrayal, and our children with your neglect. Your irritability and outbursts of anger carried over into our reality, and it didn't stop with me. It affected our children and left them confused, leaving them wondering what they did wrong to make you so angry and distant. Mandy's eyes filled with tears again as she desperately tried to keep them from spilling. I told her, I cannot and will not subject myself or our children to a life with a wife and mother who has abandoned her responsibilities. You have deeply hurt me and humiliated me more than I could ever imagine. So I intend to give you that freedom you so desire so that you can continue your life without responsibility. I will take full responsibility for caring for our children. My pain does not matter if they can be kept to a minimum. They are still young enough. Forget if they are given time to heal. My terms must be accepted and strictly observed for the sake of their well-being. First, you must never expose them to your lifestyle and the succession of men who are sure to be attracted to a free woman. If you decide to see the children, this must only happen in their home or at school events, and you have to come alone. The same applies if you decide to take them out for dinner or shopping. Secondly, you either make a commitment to spend time with them regularly or you don't spend time at all. My expectation is, from your recent behavior, is that you have already chosen the latter. Children do not fit well with the carefree lifestyle of a single woman without responsibility, so I took care of you. Congratulations, Mandy. You got what you secretly wanted for the last 6 months. Mandy screamed in tears. Did you even hear a word I said? I love you and I want to raise our children and grow old with you. I didn't abandon my family. I was lost, but I found my way back to that road we paved together for 10 years. Fantasy died on our doorstep. Your pain and my role in this destroyed it, and I never want to bring it back again. So you just go out and test the waters, living like a single person, partying, getting drunk, waking up with a hangover, and you still think you can live together. Then you start sleeping with another man, tell me you have great sex, refusing to go on a romantic weekend with your husband to try to save our sacred 10-year union, and now I'm supposed to believe that you love me. If this is your form of showing love to me, I can't even imagine how angry and hateful you would be. She would be if she hated me. Tears began to flow down her cheeks again, and she could no longer look me in the eyes. She tried to speak again. I can't imagine how much pain this has caused you, and that I caused it. I understand how hypocritical this sounds given my recent behavior, but we cannot divorce in the face of the church. I know I have broken trust and faith that you had for me, and I am ready to work tirelessly to become a good wife and an even better mother. My future efforts will be entirely directed towards fulfilling this commitment and earning your love, trust, and respect for the sake of that love that we have shared for many years, and for the sake of the stability and well-being of our children, I beg you to give me this chance. I told her that we both had a lot of thinking and soul-searching ahead of us, and that we needed to stop here, rest, and maybe find common ground. As I crawled under the covers of my bed, my thoughts left little room for the respite of sleep, and I suspected Mandy had met the same fate. The first rays of the new morning hit my sore eyes and woke me up from a short, restless sleep. I looked at Mandy. She was snoring quietly and rhythmically, whistling slightly through her nose. I quietly got out of bed, took my bag, and went to the bathroom. Closing the door, I turned on the light. He quickly showered, shaved, then dried and dressed in the bathroom before heading back out into the room. Mandy was still in Morpheus's arms as I brushed my teeth and combed my hair without turning on the light at the sink outside the bathroom. When I finished cleaning myself up, I quietly left the room and went in search of a much-needed caffeine fix in the form of a hot cup of rich Colombian dark coffee. After drinking one cup, I poured myself a second and another for Mandy. I went to the cash register, paid for the drinks, and returned to my room. As I walked back into the room, Mandy came out of the bathroom, naked this time, with a towel wrapped around her hair. I gave her a cup of coffee and said, "2 cream, no sugar." She smiled as she took the refreshing drink and simply said, "Thank you." She used a hairdryer and dried her hair. Then I combed them and got dressed. We collected our things and carried them to the car. I told her about the diner across the street where I bought coffee, and we decided it would be a good place for breakfast. We both hadn't eaten much yesterday, so we ordered waffles, bacon and sausage with eggs, orange juice, and a cup of coffee with unlimited refills. Parched from hunger, we ate in silence until all our plates were empty. With clean plates and glasses of coffee to go, I paid the bill and we left. I needed to pick up the children. The pain of her betrayal was still fresh and left me confused, so I knew that if I followed my selfish impulses, I would simply leave her without a second thought. However, in the early hours of the new day, I realized that I needed to do as I preached to Mandy the night before. I needed to act like an adult and carefully consider how any decision I made would affect my children, our faith, our friends and family, and myself. Mandy seemed sincere in her desire to repair our marriage, and for the sake of our children, I had to consider whether this would be in their best interests. I realized that, despite everything, I still love Mandy. This morning, in the shower, I came to some conclusions and made a decision. Driving down the highway, I reached out my hand and placed it on Mandy's arm. I started, "Mandy, I made a decision this morning. First, you have caused me deep and possibly irrevocable pain, but I need to focus on what is best for our children. We are committed to each other, for better or worse, and I am willing to keep that sacred oath and try. Moreover, I am also willing to abide by your decision if you have to leave and live the only life you wanted. As with my proposal, the decision is yours. I want to give you time to think before you decide. I want you to feel your heart because after this, you will no longer have a chance to return on your own. Will you be completely devoted to me and our children, or we will go our separate ways? However, there are conditions that must be met if you decide to return. First of all, no more ladies' parties, and you must agree to end your association with Chrissy. Ties must be completely severed. This is part of what I need to start rebuilding my trust, and it is non-negotiable. I told her I would move into the guest room as soon as we returned to the house. We told the children that I was sick and contagious. This will give us at least 10 to 14 days. If she needed more time, I would have left under the guise of a business trip, giving her another week. Upon my return, I took a vacation if necessary and went fishing for 2 weeks. I said, I can, with some difficulty, give you 6 weeks without arousing much suspicion. In the future, we will be forced to separate until you decide. We arrived at her parents' house in the late afternoon. They invited us to stay for dinner, and we agreed. Within a few hours, life seemed to return to some semblance of normalcy. When we returned home, I put into action the plan we had chosen. It was late in the evening on the third night of our self-imposed exile, and I had just climbed into bed when I heard a soft knock on the door. Mandy opened the door and asked, "Can I come in?" I motioned for her to come in. She said, "Dawson, I've made my decision. I love you and the children with all my heart. I am very sorry for your behavior and for the pain, hurt, and humiliation you suffered as a direct result of your completely selfish actions. I want to try to get things back to normal for us. Is the offer still valid?" I told her that it was. The next night I returned to our bed. although many months passed before we resumed physical intimacy, and it was 2 years before we shared, at least from my point of view, a truly intimate emotional connection. I can't speak for Mandy, but from my point of view, we are close and share love and respect. But I haven't been able to fully reach the same level of intimacy, even though we just recently celebrated our 17th anniversary. Bobby is 15 and Jenny will be 13 in 2 months. They are happy, well-behaved, and well-adjusted children. 2 weeks after our reconciliation, there was a knock on our door. It was destined by fate, I answered. When I opened the door, I saw a man standing there with a bouquet of flowers, and he asked for Mandy. I immediately knew who he was, but I still asked his name. He replied that it was Jake. I appreciated it. About my height and weight. His hair and complexion were darker than mine. Although I knew he had the looks to attract women, he was by no means, in my humble opinion, God's gift to the female sex. I called Mandy into the kitchen, and she came in. "What is it, honey? It's time for me to get back to the cake." When she saw him standing in the doorway, her eyes became as big as saucers, and her mouth opened as if she were catching flies. Surprise best described her at that particular moment. When she came to her senses, she said, "Jake, what the hell are you doing here?" He said, "I just wanted to see you for a minute and talk. This is for you." I told him, "Who are you to my wife that you have the audacity to barge in here without warning or invitation, ignore me, and bring flowers to my wife?" He replied, "It's none of your business. It's up to the lady." Fortunately, the children were not at home. I pointed my finger at his chest and said, "Hey, asshole, my house, my wife, and this is my damn business. I know who you are, and I fully know what you did. So take your flowers and shove them up your ass before I do it. You won't be able to get the taste of rose and shit out of your mouth for a month." Mandy told him, "Jake, go away and never again darken my door. I hate you." She ran to the kitchen in tears. She never heard from him again. About 6 months after our reconciliation, I had a second unexpected visitor. One weekend, Chrissy stopped by the house out of the blue. Mandy has just left to visit her parents. I was immediately suspicious because I thought Mandy had gotten back together with Chrissy behind my back. She wanted to speak her mind, and I let her in. First, she apologized for any role she played in our marital discord and took full responsibility. On that fateful Friday, she also had an epiphany. She told me that she truly valued Mandy as a friend and knew that through her example and some help, she had indirectly played a role in my pain as well as Mandy's harm. She told me that it made her reconsider her lifestyle, and she realized that she needed to grow up and settle down. Chrissy told me that she started dating a banker, and they were serious and exclusive. She told me that she missed Mandy very much and wanted me to allow her to rebuild their friendship on new terms. I told her that if she was willing to be just a couple for a while, they could come over for dinner next Saturday. She agreed. She called her boyfriend Stan and confirmed. I told her to come around 5 p.m. and have lunch between 6 and 6:30. We made love before we woke up on Saturday morning. I told her that we had 2 guests for dinner. We dropped Bobby and Jenny off at her parents' house and then headed to the supermarket. I bought some good roast ribs from the meat department. We added baked potatoes, carrots, and New York cheesecake to the basket, as well as crispy French baguettes. Mandy was cooking when our guests arrived. Before going into the kitchen, I made them a cocktail and told her to be ready for a surprise. She was very surprised to see Chrissy standing in our living room. I broke the ice by introducing Mandy to Stan, Chrissy's fiancé. Stan seemed to propose on Friday night, and Chrissy jumped into his arms with a determined yes. Judging by the size of the stone was on her finger, it's clear that Stan must be a pretty successful banker. I learned that he was a branch manager and would soon be promoted to vice president. The girls went to the kitchen. Chrissy told Mandy about our conversation, and they soon rediscovered their friendship. I discovered that Stan and I also had common interests outside of work, and over time we also became friends. Convinced of Chrissy's sincerity, I allowed them to start communicating again, but now only as friends, without those late-night parties that once ruined our lives. I was Stan's best man and Mandy was a bridesmaid at Chrissy's wedding 8 months later, and over time they became really close friends. When Stan became president of his bank, he lured me away from my employer and hired me to be his new vice president. I sometimes reconsidered my decision to stay married. I have friends who are divorced and believe that they did the right thing by choosing the burn bridges tactic. These same friends ended up with embittered and vindictive ex-wives and strained relationships with their children, if they had any left at all. In my case, through a lot of hard work and determination to put my children first, we were able to rebuild a stable and loving relationship while maintaining family integrity and ensuring the happiness and well-being of our children. Of course, there were consequences. The loss of emotional intimacy and trust on my side was felt for a long time. However, these problems seemed minor compared to what we achieved. Ultimately, I know I made the right decision. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to